it was really awesome to see at the Emmys this show of solidarity for people in Palestine. Gaza City is being obliterated as we speak. I saw an Israeli historian who was in central Israel at the time and is critical, obviously, of the genocide, pointing out that you could hear the bombing of Gaza City from central Israel last night. They are trying to annex the entire north, and it's not like there's anything left of Gaza City. They're bombing, besides human beings, all of the buildings.
Million people among rubble.
Yeah. And the hundreds of thousands of bodies and the evidence of their killings under that rubble is being destroyed. I just want to be clear on that, because we now know it's hundreds of thousands are dead. And Israel is trying to destroy the evidence. They're clearing out the north with bulldozers, some of the kind of militarized bulldozers that Israel is infamous for, including in the running over of the American activist Rachel Corrie over 20 years ago at this point. But we're not just having like milquetoast phrases about ceasefire anymore. And we got to give credit to those people, because they were standing up when it was really hard to at the onset of the genocide. But we're having like...
Although a lot of liberal Zionists clutched onto that, saying, oh, we can do a temporary ceasefire, which is what people like Kamala Harris or Joe Biden even like slightly supported.
And by the way, that's what liberal Israelis want too, right? When you see these protests, and it's an increase in some small minority of Israelis saying it's a genocide, talking about Palestinian children. There is a small movement there, but when you see these protests in Tel Aviv and you ask the standard liberal Israeli, they want a ceasefire to get the hostages back and then continue the military operation. That's the scope of liberalism within the settler colonial state of Israel. But Hannah Einbinder, anti-Zionist Jew, deserved winner of this of the Emmy here, because I just got to say, Hacks is the best show on TV right now, and she's incredible in it.
Very funny show on HBO.
Yeah, and moving. Like, I cry and laugh a lot, and you don't, and makes me love being a woman. It makes me want to call my mom. And I swear to God, it's like uplifting for me. Brian's laughing at me, being too earnest. Here we go. This was Hannah's acceptance speech.
Finally, I'll pay the difference. Sorry. Finally, I just want to say, finally, go Birds.
No.
And free Palestine. Thank you.
The blank spot in the audio there was fuck ice.
Yeah,
I'm
fuck
not sure
ice.
why that.
Go back.
If Emma had her choice, it would have censored Go Birds.
Yeah, they blanked at the wrong spot there. What she meant to say was Saquon Barkley is a traitor to New York City. Here we go.
Go Birds. And free Palestine. Thank you.
They didn't blur that one out. I mean, that would have been... It would have made it worse if they bleeped that out.
Palestine as a dirty word.
Yes. And did Gene Smart win too? I hope so. Yeah. Anyway.
Wasn't paying attention to the awards, actually.
There was also a point where Hannah, like, there was a shot of her and they didn't have her pin. You have that? Eventually. But we can just describe it. She turned to make sure the camera caught it. And then this was some of her explanation after as to why it was important for her to say, fuck ICE, free Palestine, in this moment in her career.
Hannah, I wanted to ask you, when you were up on stage, you talked about Palestine, and I know you signed a pledge too. Can you talk about that, please?
Yeah. So, well, I thought it was important to talk about Palestine because it's an issue that's very dear to my heart. I have friends in Gaza who are working as frontline workers, as doctors right now in the north of Gaza to provide care for pregnant women and for school children to create schools in the refugee camps. And it's an issue that's really close to my heart. For many reasons, I feel like it is my obligation as a Jewish person to distinguish Jews from the state of Israel because our religion and our culture is such an important and long-standing, basically like institution that is really separate to this sort of ethno-nationalist state. And in terms of the pledge, it's like many movements, boycotting is an effective tool to create pressure on the powers that be to meet the moment, you know? So the Film Workers for Palestine boycott does not boycott individuals. It only boycotts institutions that are directly complicit in the genocide. So yeah, it's important to me, and I think it's an important measure, and so I was happy to be a part of it.
Amazing. And she wasn't the only one. Javier Bardem, who has been outspoken on Palestine liberation for years, and I think it hurt his career, especially to say it when talking about the bombings of Gaza, maybe 2021, I feel like 2019, 2018, something like that. One of our great living actors, No Country for Old Men, one of the more perfect films of the 21st century, I will also say that. So these are good artists and good people. This is him speaking on the red carpet about what he wanted to focus on.
Here I am today denouncing the genocide in Gaza. I'm talking about the IAGS, which is the International Association of Genocide Scholars, who study thoroughly genocide and has declared it is a genocide. And that's why we ask for a commercial and diplomatic blockade and also sanctions on Israel to stop the genocide, free Palestine.
Sanctions is what we need to call for, and I just want to credit some of the other folks who signed this letter, basically boycotting Israeli film institutions. Yorgos Lanthimos, the director, great director of many Emma Stone vehicles, she also signed the letter. Joaquin Phoenix, Rooney Mara, Peter Skarsgård, Lily Gladstone are some of the actors. Ayo Edebiri, Javier Bardem, Mark Ruffalo, Cynthia Nixon, Josh O'Connor, Ilana Glazer, Rebecca Hall. I mean, the list goes on and on. These are thousands of people. Bowen Yang, Guy Pearce, Elliot Page, Harris Dickinson. These are big names right now in Hollywood, standing up and standing together, because it's a lot easier when you join together with other actors, where some of the stuff that we saw in the first year, it makes it harder for Hollywood executives to blackball actors like we were seeing initially. I mean, Rachel Zegler, I feel like, was on the cusp, but there were smaller actors who were completely, fired and their careers irrevocably harmed, especially early on in the genocide, when it was a lot harder to say these kinds of things, when it mattered too. And these folks that signed this also, Olivia Colman, I think, is mentioned. It's not like they're not taking a risk, but the fact that they're doing it together, and the fact that there are big names on there like Ruffalo, like Javier Bardem, like Emma Stone too, makes it that much more of a powerful statement, I would say. And Morgan Spector, who is on The Gilded Age and really good on that show too.
DSA.
In DSA. Love to hear that. He spoke to Prem Takur of Zeteo about his decision also to join in this effort.
It's massively asymmetrical. You have a nuclear-armed state, first world weapons backed by the global hegemon, the imperial hegemon, right? And then you have a bunch of people who have been under siege for 16 years and have been barely able to get some weapons in and out via these tunnels or via whatever else. That is not going to be a war. That is going to be a slaughter. And I think, people talk about rockets and people talk about all these other things. Iron Dome is extremely effective. This is basically a battle between like Israel wants to portray itself as David. Israel is Goliath. Israel has been Goliath for a long time. I felt it was important to take a position, especially somebody in my industry, because it was clearly dangerous. It was clearly people were being told you can't talk about this. People were being punished. People were being, internally and in weird social ways, people were being punished. And so it felt like, well, I have a little bit of cover. My father's Jewish. I come from, half my family's Jewish, and I, come from the perspective of understanding the history of the Holocaust and how that has informed Jewish identity. And that made me feel like I had an ability to speak and maybe more permission to speak than other people would have. And I felt like an obligation in that sense, and also as an American, because these are our weapons. This is our protection, our military cover, our diplomatic cover enables this. Yeah, it can't continue.
I understand also sometimes I think there's a lot of either Palestinian Americans or Palestinians or anybody even who is a Muslim person who gets a little bit frustrated by how it seems like the only way you can break through in our media ecosystem is as an anti-Zionist Jew, and even then you're smeared as an anti-Semite or a self-hating Jew or whatever, because that's how dehumanized Palestinians have been just broadly in our society. And we have over 2 decades at this point of post 9/11 war on terror Islamophobia that has been codified in our foreign policy and in our domestic policy of basically stripping constitutional protections for people if you're in a mosque or if you're Muslim. That makes it so that Arab and Muslim voices and Palestinian voices are, it's like they're speaking and people just don't hear them. So when you have someone like Hannah Einbinder or Morgan, I'm sorry, what's his last name? Spector, speaking about how Zionism is not Judaism, I can see if you are somebody who's Palestinian, why it's like, well, we've been saying this for X, Y, and Z. Why does it have to just be within the confines of Jewish pain? And I think that's very valid, but we also have to be tactical. And this is why it's so, even it underscores its importance, because there's no other way to get through.
I mean, there's the immediate issue, and like, who knows what the best solution is to stopping the final solution being carried out on Gazans right now. I mean, the people go in with the flotillas, like this sort of direct, who knows what the best thing is? That is the immediate issue, and frankly, the world's failing, and even neighboring countries are really signing up for Gazans. Then there's this wider thing that is going to be dealt with on a longer term, which is Judaism and this settler colonial project. And I just want to return to what Hannah said about distinguishing herself from the ethno-nationalist project of Israel. She also posted this on Instagram. Zionism is actually not just the idea of Jewish self-determination. Johnny Greenblatt, who's the leader of the Anti-Defamation League. It is a settler colonial political project predicated upon the colonization of the land of Palestine to create a Jewish majority wherein Jews have more rights than Palestinians. And she puts in parentheses apartheid. This genocide we are watching unfold is necessary for Zionism to thrive. This is why I personally hate the term liberal Zionist. It absolves the identifier of acknowledging the actual definition of the system designed to kill Palestinians and colonize their land. It is why I identify as an anti-Zionist. I would be and am against the colonization of Palestine when the British did it in 1948 and also after. When the land was handed to Zionists, no matter who the settler class was, I would be against them. And what's happened is a basically nationalist fascist colonization of a world religion. That's what we're dealing with with Zionism right now. And there's this guy, was it Hen Mazig? Actually it was this Michael Cohen speech boy guy who said, if you're a Jew and don't understand that Judaism and Jewish culture are inextricably tied to Israel, then you really don't understand anything about being Jewish. Now, I'm not going to defer to Zionist Jews about Israel as they slaughter tens and tens and thousands of people with our bombs. It's time to extract it. It's not inextricable that a fascist settler state like Israel becomes completely ingrained with one of the world's great religions. It's actually an accident of history and a big fucking shame that our generations are going to deal with over the heads of people like Michael Cohen. We do not defer to you people on anything, regardless of whether we're Jewish like Hannah Einbinder is or we're Gentiles like we are. We don't care about this. I don't care about this whole like mythological Israel that you claim to admit. We see what Israel is. It is a violent, it just bombs its neighbors, and we have to act surprised about it. It's massacring tens and hundreds of thousands of people and sending missiles just across the entirety of the Middle East.
It's a perversion of the legacy of the Holocaust as well, in that there was a class of folks who saw in the aftermath of World War II that there was a ton of economic opportunity in building out United States kind of imperialism and militarism, and you had this burgeoning capitalist class of oil men and interests in the United States that were kind of left out of previous like colonial structures, but needed to build up their extraction efforts in the Middle East. And that merged with the burgeoning military-industrial complex, national security state, the creation of things like the CIA out of the OSS, and the latter half of the 20th century was marked by U.S. imperialism across the world, and especially in the later part, oriented towards the resource of oil and natural gas, and much of the same incentive structure in terms of like building up Israel as our aircraft carrier in the Middle East can be seen through that lens. So it was a capitalist and imperialist exploitation of Jewish pain that now you have folks like that lecturing American Jews who are, we don't have enough polling on this issue, but New York City is one of the most Jewish cities in the entire world. I think it might be the most Jewish city outside of Israel. And the polling on the general population here is that plus 18 in terms of sympathy for Palestinians. So like guys like that, they're going to have a harder time as more Jews are, vocal about this. And they have been, they've just been silenced, claiming that Zionism equals Judaism over and over again. And by the way, the rise of these anti-Semitic right-wing podcasters can be traced directly to the insistence that we treat Zionism and Judaism as inextricably linked. When did it become inextricable? It's not even 100 years old. This religion is thousands and thousands of years old. Yep. Why is it inextricable now?
Yeah, because
of the Holocaust, because of the lessons learned. What about the lessons after the Spanish Inquisition? When did Zionism become inextricably linked to Judaism?
To nationalism.
Was it when Balfour was saying we don't want Jews in our country, so might as well send them to Palestine, basically? That's when it became?
Exactly. It's a colonial project. That's why they're in fucking Eurovision and Eurobasket. It is a colonial project. Israel has never, and this is, read Avi Shlaim's Iron Wall if you want like 800 words on this topic. Israel has never wanted to be a good neighbor in the region. It's always wanted to dominate, and that's in part because whether it's not just the U.S., honestly, like the USSR gave them, I believe the fighter jets done in like early bombing missions, but it's about dominating that part of the world, and Israel's never. That's why they just send a missile at Qatar. Who cares? Yeah. Who's going to do anything?
I mean, did you see that clip of Netanyahu talking about cell phones? To those.
Oh, I heard he said like, if you have a cell phone, you have a piece of Israel, and
I'm sure in coming years we'll get some sort of reporting on how this is how deranged this man has become. I've heard he's like littered his office with photos of the destruction of Gaza all over the walls.
I get people, and like Netanyahu's of course insane. I get Zionists on Twitter calling me an anti-Semite, and they have the beeper emoji in their username.
It was a threat.
And they don't see like any kind of contradiction of that. By the way, here's Hannah making sure her pin is shown on TV.
Very subtle.
But yeah, I mean it's a whole different fight, and it's obviously not the most acute one. The most acute one is to save Gaza City from being completely flattened as this death toll goes up from the hundreds of thousands that's undoubtedly at right now to the millions. But there's this other civilization, world historically important fight. And polling is one thing. Hannah and all the other anti-Zionist Jews are correct, whether they're like as outnumbered as they are within Israel itself, like the refusnik, Edo Elam, and like those folks that we do, or whether they have growing numbers like we know they do in America. They are correct that you should not, like Speech Boy 71, who has me blocked on Twitter for a long time, you should not just accept that this religion and this nation are inextricable. Fuck that. It's time to whatever the opposite of inextricable is, extricable. It would make it extricable.
Theo Bong, was Netanyahu's comment about the phones possibly a veiled threat, making people think of the infamous beeper war crimes? Yes, it was a veiled threat towards the lawmakers. It was like a bunch of state lawmakers from all 50 states, according to Israel at least, went there for some sort of summit. And Netanyahu made some comment saying, you have a little bit of Israel in your phone. And it's also a way to signal that Israel probably kind of is in your phone. Their software,
They're
Pegasus,
spying on you, definitely.
is spying on people's phones. And given the state of the Trump administration, I don't know if you can count on things like warrants.
But I would say on the optimistic side, there's this tweet here from, I'm not sure who this guy is, Nadav with... I'm not sure.
Ynet, so
who knows
in Israel.
But this headline is interesting. Breaking: Netanyahu says Israel would have to be, quote, Athens and a super Sparta, warning the country is in a kind of isolation and will need to have autarkic features, specifically in the military industry.
Normal.
Very harsh reactions across the political spectrum. The opposition chairman says it's absolutely nuts. Well, maybe you're in denial at what kind of country you're living in. Because yes, the world is going to reject it. I believe that's even the follow-up here, or maybe not. But is that like, yes, as the world decides like we're going to stop having relationships with trade relationships with a genocidal country, Israel will have to be more independent. It can't survive that way.
Yeah.
And I think part of what Bibi says when he's like, part of it is in your phone is because Israel has been selling its tech sort of industry as, you know, massively important to the world. And you have even companies like NVIDIA saying we're going to do production in Israel or whatever. If they lose all that stuff and they're actually not being able to be incorporated in the world economy, who the fuck needs it?
Yep.
They're in a huge trouble if this comes to pass. So like, and it's interesting the opposition being like, we don't want it, we're not ready for that. Well, you should have thought about that before you let Netanyahu stay in power and do a genocide.
And in that Chotner interview, Jack Lew admitted that the Biden administration wanted to keep the Netanyahu government in power.
Of course. Some people wanted to see Israel fail, and we couldn't see that, so we had to support a genocide.
Christ woke star, when we say we don't know how to solve the genocide, we know what is the moral and ethical steps. Send U.S. troops into Gaza and West Bank to liberate the Palestinians and then remove all the colonialist fascist Europeans from the region. Sorry, they lost their privilege. You know, it's a little far-fetched. I still think that yes, we do need to sanction Israel. I would be in favor of U.S. troops protecting the remaining Palestinians in some sort of like fantastical way, because that's not happening under Donald Trump. But I do think that there needs to be some sort of truth and reconciliation committee, especially about the settlers in the West Bank. But there will need to be a state where Israelis and Palestinians live side by side. Prosecute the criminal settlers, agree.
I mean, the
right of return across the board, and then the UN as a peacekeeping kind of body.
Well, that's the thing.
ensuring that.
Israel can't have the monopoly of violence in the region and decide willy-nilly, oh, we're gonna like shoot a missile. We're gonna blow up all the apartment complexes in Gaza, and meanwhile, like also Qatar, here's a missile too. That can't be allowed, and there's no appetite for that to take the like sort of gun out of the insane toddler's hands or 75-year-old toddler's hands.
Hey folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.